Hey everyone, I'm here with Professor Jacqueline Troy from the University of Sydney. Professor Troy is the Director of Indigenous Research at Sydney Uni, and I'm thrilled that she's made time to speak with us today about how and why we can acknowledge country in the language of the Gadi people.
Didgerigura, thank you. Thank you in the language of the Gadi mob. Some years ago, I was working with a group of people who are all Sydney language people. So the language of Sydney is across the whole Sydney basin. One of the things that came up was how would people be able to do exactly what you're asking, give a simple acknowledgement that was respectful and in language. And so we workshopped this short acknowledgement, which is either Ninari or Nini, Nalawangun, Maribajari, Garinurada. So Ninari, Nalawangun, Maribajari, Garinurada. So that first part, Nini or Ninari, is we, it's a pronoun, and Nalawa is to sit down or to meet, to talk together, and the part on the end of it is again the pronoun. So basically it's we will sit down together and meet, and the mari is very, Vajari is good, Gadi is again the Gadi, which is the Xantheria and the name for the clan group around the Sydney CBD area where our Camperdown campus for Sydney University is. Nura da. Nura is country and da is to be at or on a place. The law school, one thing that we talk a lot about as Aboriginal people is law, L-A-W, law, in the sense of, how to manage human interactions, how we manage our interactions with the environment, the legal basis for how we behave ethically as well as humans to not only each other but all the so-called non-human world. And so this idea of, having this base for considering law at University of Sydney is really important because, of course, Gadi people, Gadigal, were people who upheld the law of country and of relationships with each other and other communities that came into their area, including when the British invaded in 1788. Nura, country, has law, and so to be on country, Nurada, is to know, you need to know how to respect law. And one of the things you do is you acknowledge the country and its people and that you are in somebody else's country. So you would be welcomed in with a welcome to country that makes you safe, that lets everybody, ancestral figures as well as people who are around you that you can see, all the seen and unseen, will then know that you're there and you have permission to be there, and that makes you safe. And then you respond with an acknowledgement. So if there's no one to welcome you into country, at the very least, it's good to do an acknowledgement.
Why do you think it's so important that people do that acknowledgement in the language that's the Indigenous language of the place, in this case, in Gadi language?
Well, I think I'm preaching to the converted in talking to anyone with a legal background, because if you attempt to do anything legal in the wrong language, you will be pulled up fairly quickly. And language is used to discover law. It's a process of discovery, as I understand it, having been involved in a lot of heavy duty legal matters myself, like the drafting of the Native Title Act, for example. And I guess the best way I could put it is that if you don't speak in the language of country, it will have a different nuance, a different meaning. But we can translate. Of course, every language has the capacity to translate ideas from one language to another. But sometimes it also takes having a kind of feeling for the culture that you can get more easily if you speak a language. So when you speak somebody's language, you become a part of that cultural world. And so using the language actually gives you a better understanding and a better way of engaging with the people that you're dealing with.
Is there a point to be made that speaking in the language of the place where we are is a way of connoting respect?
It's absolutely the case. I mean, there's nothing quite like speaking to someone in their own language, even if all you can do is say hello.
Yeah.
Incidentally, if you want to say hello to a Gadigal community member, you say Warami.
Warami.
If you want to say goodbye, you say Yanu.
Yeah.
That will work across all of Sydney because everybody speaks the same language in the Sydney area.
Where could you direct law school staff or students if they wanted to deepen their understanding of Australian Indigenous language?
Well, Australian languages now have so many resources available to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in some ways I would direct you to the Australian Institute for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, to their website. They're busily publishing a whole lot of very accessible grammatical descriptions, so grammars and dictionaries of Australian languages. They've always done this, and they also have a huge repository of information about Australian languages. My own little book about the language of Sydney was republished in 2019.
Congratulations.
By Aboriginal Studies Press, so it's quite interesting to be republished in your own lifetime. But that's a great resource. There's also a group, First Languages Australia, and they have a website that has a map that where you can hear little snippets of people speaking in many of the languages of Australia. Torres Strait Regional Authority is worth investigating if you're interested in the languages of the Torres Strait, and one of those languages is an Aboriginal language as well. So and others are from a different family group. So there are more and more resources, and I'm also always very happy to talk to people about Australian languages. Well, Didjerigura, Rosemary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really delighted that the law school is such a champion of all things Indigenous.